And so first of all, Baruch Hashem, I think Lefi Erech, last sugya was very matzliach. A few bachrim came to me over the last few days. One bacher tells me that Mamish now, as he went through the last sikha, now he understood the mahalach. He got the mahalach. And that's taka a big yisoid over here, and I think it's a new kav of figuring out, of learning many sikhs in one inyan, and trying to figure out the Rebbe's mahalach here. So that was a shtickle. There was a shir psiche, but the whole sugya was a shtickle sugya psiche. And from that sugya, we're going into this sugya. The emes is that Lefi Erech, it's a seamless flow, because if you look at the beginning of the first sikha here, Veschanon, you see that a mamish starts with that inyan, with the nekuda of emunah and yediyah. Where's the lashon there? Right in the beginning of the sikha. Yeah, that tzvei psukim, the second line, as in yonim is the emunah and yediyah ki avayu alikim. And then the weiter goes on in that, the nekuda of the emunah and the yediyah. And the emes is that there are parallels between this sugya and the previous sugya. I'm saying that lechatchila because there's no nicht kommen später mit Tainus. The nekuda I'm going to bring out is that, as you realize, you go through the sikhs, especially the sugyas and chassidus, sof and ganz chassidus, there's a lot of similar terminology and nekudis and inyanim. And on the one hand, there's a certain gishmak, a certain familiarity with it. So it's sort of, you don't feel like you're starting in ganzen and nayazam. You could get a bit bored, or feel that and then once you see the Rebbe being mechaber in yonim, so you already start running to atzmos and chibur kol in yonim, and it's not true. But at the same time, the pratim and the chidushim and yeder zach and yeder sicha and every sugya are gevaldik. Another hakdama when I get to this sugya, and already a few chevre brought it up. Achdus Hashem. So talking about Achdus Hashem. Achdus Hashem is not another sugya in the Sichos. Achdus Hashem is ganz chassidus, yeah. And it's taka true, and mitzad echad, and that's part of the geshmak of the sugya. Mefratz is chedesh kislev, the chassidish chedesh, a goludik chedesh. But at the same time, the sugya is not ganz achdus Hashem. If you want ganz achdus Hashem, you could start with Sefer Erchim, end of chelik ches, ganz chelik tes, void yadam netuya, the following krachim. Right, so Achdus Hashem obviously is a massive sugya, including in the Rebbe's Torah as well. It was called Achdus Hashem because also that's the name of this sugya, but in Achdus Hashem Guf, it's Lefi Erech in a certain kav, meaning there's a certain kesher between all these sikhs here. Even though the oyasius of the sikhs and the terms in the sikhs might be very different, and we'll go through some of them tonight, but the nekuda, and this is the nekuda I'm trying to bring out, what's the kav, what's the shnit that you'll see throughout all these sikhs, even though the Rebbe uses many different terms. The third hakdama before we start is that many of these sikhs, bisman, when they came out, when these sikhs were printed, when the sikhs were mugeh, they were ma'apecha, meaning it's not. Versteht sich, man sagt nicht Shmuel zu no, Shmuel zu einer no. I think that everyone said that you can't say Shmuel zu no, but Shmuel zu einer no. But sagen Shmuel zu no without the tzad hasheni. Right, meaning that there's these sikhs, right? You just look at there's obviously the sikhs from the Kut sikhs, and then there's a sikh of Kuntas Yonos Teres Chassidus, Hadin al Rambam Tov Shel Lamed Hey, Ve'oid, and these sikhs bisman when they came out, they were mamish ma'apecha. Each one was in Avon of in Yisoidistik in Yonim Chassidus and in Achdus Hashem, as we'll discuss weiter. Fine. So the sugya of Achdus Hashem, is mamish the yisoidistik sugya l'cheira in Chassidus. You look over here, the beginning of Shi'ur ve'emunah, that's brought here in the beginning, right? Shi'ur ve'emunah starts lahavin mat mizir mashakasa bezoyer deshma Yisrael chulu v'yichudu yilov baruch shem kveim malchusi le'ilon vod yichud tata. And of them is the Shi'ur ve'emunah, and we know Shi'ur ve'emunah, even though it was printed as the second chelik in Tanya. But there was a svara to print it as the first chelik, and not only was a svara, Alter Rebbe left different inyonim in a few places in Tanya where you see that actually this comes like yisbayer, certain things are what was first, what was second. He left certain inyonim to show that even after the maskana, be'etzem sha'yichud be'amunah kumt freer, because ultimately that's the yisoid, the yichud, Achdus Hashem. So Kleina Maisa, so Maisa brought in the Beis Rebbe that the Alter Rebbe was on the way to the Magid. This was that's the last time he went to the Magid. Was Tov Kuf Lamed, maybe when no time afterwards, but he was on the way to the Magid, And on the way, he stopped off by Pinchas Karatzer. Pinchas Karatzer was another one of the greatest Talmidim of Baal Shem Tov. As he stops off by Pinchas Karatzer, so Zamin, and then Pinchas Karatzer hears that the Alter Rebbe is on the way to the Magid. So Pinchas Karatzer tells the Alter Rebbe, "Bleib bei mir, stay here, and I'll teach you." And he gives him a whole list of things that he'll teach him. He tells him like this: "I'll teach you Sichas Ha'oifis, the language of the birds; Sichas Hadkolim, the language of the trees; Maise Merkava, Maise Bereshis, und wie zu gehen in die Echolis." The Alter Rebbe said, the Alter Rebbe hears, the Alter Rebbe said, was is negeit zu wissen, what we have to know is, the einzige Sache is, Yachid, Echad, and Void. Und das lernt man beim Magid. It's a shkoyach for the offer, it's a very enticing offer, but this was negeit. First of all, just understand how history could have been, how different things could have been, and what would be our sprach, yeah? but the Nekuda is, he went to the Magid, getting excited, yeah? He's saying we still have, even with Chabad, we also have people speaking to... The Alter Rebbe comes to the Magid, and as he comes to the Magid says, Reb Pinchas wanted to teach you Sichas Ha'oifis v'chulu. Therefore, the Magid says, I'm going to teach you Yichudi Lo and Yichud Tato. It's interesting that the Alter Rebbe said it as, you're teaching me this, but the only thing that's negeya is Yachid Echad Void. The Magid, the Lashon born by Rebbe is, they're far. But because he wanted to teach you that, therefore I'm going to teach you Yichudi Lo, Yichud Tato. Upon what do you see? You see that ultimately Yichudi Lo, Yichud Tato, Yachid, Echad, Void, right? The terms are not as much negeya as the Nikud that we're bringing out over here. That it's Achdus Hashem. That's what it's all about. Now, Chassidus comes, and what is Chassidus Mechadash and Achdus Hashem? So this very Geshmakia Loshin, Yisoid that Tzemach Tzedek puts down, it's Bechlal and Derech Mitzvah the Tzemach Tzedek is Mevar, the mitzvahs, according to Chassidus. But when you get to Achdus Hashem, the Tzemach Tzedek brings the Indian very, very clear, and he says like this, that there's three stages in the Havan of Achdus Hashem. There's Al-Pi Nigle, Al-Pi Pnimiyas HaTeira, Al-Pi Zoyar, and Al-Pi Chassidus. Al-Pi Nigle Teira, what's Achdus Hashem? Shema Yisrael Avayid Elkein Avayid Echad. It's one of the Shesh Mitzvahs Tmidiyas, to believe that the Eibishter is Echad. What does it mean Echad with Pashtus? Yeah, you look in Pashtus, you look in Rambam. Pashtus, before you get to the Hadranim, yeah? So, Pashtus, looking in Halacha, the mitzvah is Asdod, nor ein Eibishter. There's one Shalit, there's one Balabas. The Eibishter is the Intzika Balabas, Vashemayim Mimau, Lords Mitachas. And there's no other boss. Comes Pnimi Satira, comes Zoyer, and Zoyer comes and tells us that what's the word of Achdus Hashem, not only the Eibishter is the only Shalit in the ganze Welt, but Meret, Pnimi Satira redt doch in Oiris, in Spheres, in Alikus Gufe. And the word in Alikus Gufe is, that's not Zvei Shemis, there's Shem Avaya and Shem Alikim, and Pnimi Satira tells us that Avaya Alikim Kul Achad. That don't think that these are two different koiches. It's Kul Achad. In other words, there's no harkov in Alikus Gufe, it's Kul Achad. And then the way that Tzemach Tzedek says, the Lashon is, Al Pi Oimek Yisayda Baal Shem Tov. Then there's Achdus Hashem, Al Pi Oimek Yisayda Baal Shem Tov. What's that? Pi Oimek Yisayda Baal Shem Tov is not only Avay Velikim Kul Achad, and that the Eibishter is the only Shalit, that the Eibishter is the Einzike Metzias. He's the only Balabas. Versteht sich? He's the only Metzias that exists. Nothing exists. Einen Mulvadi is Kipshuti. Einen Mulvadi, there is nothing else other than the Eibishter, other than Elikus. Fine. So this is the Yisoid of Achdus Hashem according to Chassidus. Now, after versteht sich, fragt sich the Shaila, the simple Shaila, how can you say the Eibishter is the only Metzias? It's doch jeder Welt. We're alive, I'm alive, you're alive, there's a table, there's a room, there's a sky outside, there's a sun, there are things. So with Pashtus you'll come and say, fine. If Chassidus tells us that the Eibishter is the Ein Tzke Metzias, we see many other things and we experience many other things in our lifetime. So with Pashtus, what do you say? It's Al Tzedimyan. It's not real. The Eibishter is the only Metzias, everything else is fake. Here Chassidus comes and says, right, and the Rebbe always brings, what's the mucker for this tzad? The Rebbe always brings the Rebbe Marash. It's one of when the Rebbe would quote the Rebbe Marash's Torah. This is one of the main quotes in Mikamecha Chavtes. That no, we know that the Welt is a Metzias. How do we know the Welt is a Metzias? The first mucker is there's the pasuk, Bereshis Aleph Aleph. Yeah, it's not only mucker negate to Eretz Yisrael, it's also negate Chalas Da Welt. That there's a Welt Bechlal, that there's a Metzias. Bereshis Bar Lekim Es Hashmayim Es Arts. If Torah tells us the Eibishter created the world, there's a world. Und Teres Emes. Then there's another makir from Achizas Einayim and Kishiv. I'm going to get into those prat. Fine. And here, Be'etzem starts the sugya of Achdus Hashem in Chassidus. On the one hand, Nishtakin Welt. Achdus Hashem means the Eibusher is the only Metzias. Right? Another word, another term for Achdus Hashem is Bittul Lo'elamis. In other words, wie versteht Chassidus Achdus Havaya? As Nishtakin Welt. Nishtakin Metzias. So Bittul Lo'elamis is the other side of the coin of Achdus Havaya. So on the one hand, Bittul Lo'elamis. Nishtakin Welt. On the other hand, Siyado Welt. Bereshis Bar Lekim es Hashmayim Esaretz. Fine. So how do we understand this? And so here, Shayuch Emunah and Achdus Hashem and the regular Mamorim, right? You have the Mamorim Ha'umnom, B'chulu, of the Sugi of Achdus Hashem. What's the Nekudah? There's many Biyurim in Achdus Hashem, right? You look in the Erechim, you'll see the amount of Biyurim in Achdus Havaya is Mamish Bligvul. So many different Biyurim Achdus Hashem. What's the Nekudah? The Nekudah is that Takis Sidoa Welt, but the Welt, as we know it, and the Welt is a Metzias, but this Welt is bottled to the Eibishter. This Metzias of Welt is bottled to the Eibishter. How is the world bottled and why is it bottled? Here are many, many different Biyurim. The first, you say the stick of beer that's brought in Shayuchot Ve'emunah, and this is the famous beer. What's the beer? The beer is that the Eibishter is Mehave the Welt and Mechaya the Welt b'chol rega v'rega. Yisavos b'chol reg. And what's the var? This is Betzim in Perak Aleph, Perak Beis Shayuchot Ve'emunah. He says that the Welt Betzim shouldn't exist. The world is created yesh me'ayin. Something that is not supposed to exist, something that's hipech its teva, in order for it to be, needs a ischadshus timidus, needs to always be brought into existence. Right, and therefore he brings the mashal here in Tanya, he brings the mashal of Kriyas Yamsuf. Water, Betzim, is supposed to flow. It's not supposed to stand up. In order for it to stand, it constantly needs the Ruach Kodim to hold it up. The mashal that's brought in Chassidus a lot more, and the Derech is attributed to Ha'umnom and other Mamarim, is the mashal of Zrika 7, right? You throw up a stone is supposed to be falling down, like everything that falls down. So how does it stay up? Because there's a koyach, a Zrika that holds it up. The moment the koyach ceases to exist or be with the Evan, the koyach is over, so the Evan falls down. Fine. So v'meile, the Eibush there has to be Mahava the Oilam Mechol Rega, because Betzim the Welt should be garnished, shouldn't exist. And because the Eibush there is Mahava Mechaya the Welt Mechol Rega, therefore, we say the Welt is bottled. Meaning the Welt is not really in existence. It's mitzidoi, it's not here. It only exists because the Eibush there wills it into existence. The Eibush there makes it exist. So its existence is attributed to the koyach. So there existed. The Eibush there existed. The world only exists because he brings it into existence. So the lashon sometimes brought in Chassidus is, does the Welt exist? It exists, but it's not an independent existence. So the lashon will be, it's not a metzias amitis. Right? Different nuscha is brought in different mamarim. It doesn't. You can't really say it exists because it's completely dependent, and that's the first basic beer, which even Klali and Chassidus will be called Yichud Ilah. Right? And then we go to Yichud Tata, and then make it hecher to Yichud Ilah. Now, many of the sichos here will discuss this nekudah in Achdus Hashem of the Yishabus O'ilam coming mitzad the Dvar Hashem shebesoichoi that gives it its kiyum and gives it its chayis, and therefore it exists. And here the Rebbe will have kol minei diyukim. Now, so on the one hand, you can learn this kunteris, and this also explains the mahalach of this kunteris. On the one hand, you can learn the mahalach of the kunteris. It's a koivitz of the Rebbe's biyurim on Shari Yichud Ve'emunah the Ershte Prakim. Right. So first we have here Perak Aleph and Beis. On Perak Aleph and Beis there are a few sichos from the Kudah Sichos. Then, towards the end, then there's a small inyan that are in sichos that are not full sichos or even a full sifim. So you have here on page 49, you have here very geshmake ha'aris and b'shalach chelik vav. They're very yisaidistic in how the Rebbe learns the bitul elam. Then on page 58, you have Prakim Gimel through Hey, and then Behemshech Lazeh, there's a long sicha from Shabbos Parshas Mishpatim Tafshin Chav Zayin that explains the mahalach of those sichas. Fine. So first you have many sichos that are miyosed on Perek Aleph and Beis, and then there are sichos that there's the long sicha that's miyosed on Perakim Gimel through Hey, and it's Pasha Biyurim on Tanya. Right? It's the Chedesh Kislev, and there's a Yisiyim of Tanya Bald, and we have Tanya from the Snai. The Biyurim on Tanya. But then it's a lot more. Because first of all, there are a lot more Biyurim on Tanya. Obviously, these are the Yisayis Biyurim, but there's other Biyurim as well. But when you go through these sichos, you'll also see a Mahalach. And what's the Mahalach? And Kimeduber, in every sicha, the terms, number one, the terms change, meaning the kalim, the psukim we're speaking about, the oisias we're using will be different, but also the biyurim change. But the yisoid that goes through them is l'chera zeir klar. What's the yisoid? So first of all over here, so the first sicha this is one of the classic sichas on Shar Yichud Emunah, V'eschanon chelek chof tes, right, a famous sicha, it's a full sicha, that explains the first perek in Shar Yichud Emunah. What's the nekudah, the yisoid that the Rebbe puts over here? So the yisoid the Rebbe speaks about barichas over here is that you look in Perek Aleph Shar Yichud Ve'emunah. There's long arichas of l'shoinus, and you see very often he says like this. He brings the nekudah of mehavis and mechayis. Right. So a lot of times there's lashon mehave and lashon chayis. And the dvar of chay mekayomim, that the oisias that come into this world are the chayis, that they're in the nivroim, and there's a lashon of chayis. Another lashon that's brought come upon him is milubashes. That the oisias are milubish in the world, and these are the oisias that Rebbe uses here of slabshus and chayis. And what's the nekudah? The nekudah is a zay. Rebbe Pashtos, when you hear the vart of the Baal Shem Tov, what's the vart of the Baal Shem Tov? The vart is that the pasuk says lo'elam avayat dvarcha nitzu b'shamayim. So the Baal Shem Tov is mevayer. Right? The Rebbe brings many times. Already the Medrash Tilim says it. When need the Baal Shem Tov? Baal Shem Tov is pirish miloshin. So he was a Pharisee in the Indian and gekocht in the Indian. There's also certain diyukim that on the Baal Shem Tov's vart. That's not the Medrash Tilim. What does the Baal Shem Tov say? The Baal Shem Tov is mevayer that everything that was created with a Dvar Hashem. So L'mashal, the Shemayim was created with Yehirakia. So the Oisias of Yehirakia gefinnen sich in the Welt, constantly to give it, to allow it to exist. But the way the Baal Shem Tov says it's not only that the Oisias are here to be mechayed. He says that these Oisias are melubish in the Welt. What's the word of the Slapshus? The Slapshus Nekuda is that Pashas you could say the world exists, the world has its own identity. It's so mitzias. How does this mitzias exist? There's this koyach that keeps it in place, that keeps it going. It's like you put a motor, right? There's an engine within this world, and this engine gives us chayas, right? So you turn on the light, and now there's light over here. Now when you're turning on, you're turning on the switch. The switch is not light. It's not oil. The switch is something that creates that generates the energy, the electricity, and the electricity brings light into existence. So you have a mitzias that allows another mitzias to exist. But when we say mislabshes and mislabish and mechayet, what we're saying is a sachtifer. That not only the Eivishter's koyach allows the nivraim to exist, but rather it's mislabish, it becomes the identity of the nivra. Meaning that if you look at the nivra, vos is the nivra, vos is the chayis from the nivra, what's the pnimius of the nivra? The pnimius of the nivra is its chayis alikis. That's its identity. That's what it is. It's not something foreign to it that's giving it allowing it to exist. It becomes the foundation of its existence, its whole toichen of its mitzias. Now, in the sichos over here, the Rebbe is not mivayir this Indian that much. It's mivur. I would say, I think we should put it in here. We'll just say there's some geshmaka oisias in the sicha of Bahar B'chu Koisai Tafshin Nun Aleph. In the middle of the sicha there, it speaks there about Masar Mamaris and Maimer Echad. So in that Mugdik Sicha, there's some Geshmaka Oisias there where the Rebbe explains how the Asar Mamaris becomes the identity and the Toichin Pnimi of the Nivra. And just in one line, so L'mashal, right? So what do we have? So we have a Mitzvah. So what's our Mitzvah? Our Mitzvah, let's say, are as human beings, and we have different. We have emotions. We have Chacham V'Nadas, Chabad, Chagas, Nehim. Right? That's what makes a human being. So you look at the human being and you say, one second. who are you? On my thoughts, on my feelings. That's my identity, right? But then the shaila is, what are these thoughts? What are these ideas? This that you have Chabad, this that you have Chagas, and him, was is this? So what's Chesed? Chesed is be'etzem Chesed of Atzilus. It's Chesed of the Eibishter. It's Chesed of the Eibishter that is tzamtzim and is slabish, and now becomes your Chesed, right? And your Chochmah. So basically now what happens is that through this Islam shus, our Metzias is basically a representation and a manifestation of the Eibishter's Keiches. So we're not just created by the Eibishter Yesh Me'ai and the Eibishter is Zerachik from us. Rather, who are we? We are an expression of the Eibishter himself. Fine. What is this Neget Achdus Hashem? What this Neget Achdus Hashem is, that this is a Sach Tifere Havana in our Shaykhs to the Eibishter. Because if you say that the Eibishter, that our dependence on the Eibishter is, that without the Eibishter we can't exist, fine. So if you're talking about mitzad only dependency, then richtig. Without him, we're not here. But the flip side is, but with him, once he does create us, once he creates us, and he allows us to exist, so my mitzvah is a mitzvah b'fnei atzma. You can technically divide, right? You can make a split between my mitzvahs and the Eibishter's mitzvahs. I need him, but I need him, right? There's a me, there's a velt that is totally in him. But once you say that the Eibishter is nislabish in the nivra, then there is the whole toichin of the nivra, the whole mitzvahs of the nivra is the Eibishter. So it's not only a dependency, rather it's who we are, it's our identity. It's not only I'm dependent on him, the velt is him, the velt is alikus. Fine, that's the Eresh Sikh. And this is the first side of the coin. And this brings out, you could say, the gadlus of Yichud Tata. Because the Parshas Yichud Tata is Kishma Kenu. It's Tata, and Yichud Ilah is Ilah. It's lower, right? If it's lower, there's the Chisar. What's the Chisar? Because usually the Chisar of Yichud Tata is, Sof, the Eibishter brings this world into existence. So so the Welt is not, you can't say the Welt is a ganzen bottle because the Eibishter allows the world to exist. Right? Versus Yichud Ilah, where the world is in ganzen bottle. We'll get to that later. So here we come and say that Taka Yichud Tata has that in Kudah where the Eibishter gives Epson and Sinas Makim La'ilam. But Mitzat Sheni, the bittul here is very, very stark. Why? Because what happens in this bittul is that because the Dvar Hashem is nislabish in the Nivra and becomes the Metzias of the Nivra, there's no prat of the Nivra that's not him, that's not the Eibishter. Who am I? The expression of Elikus. But, so that's the first sikh. Comes the second sikh. The second sikh is Vayeshev Yutas Kislev Chelek Chafei. So it's very geschmack sikh. If you have time, you can learn the whole sikh Chafei. But here's the Yena Shol Torah of the sikh. And here in this sikh, so you look over here in Sif Yud. So Sif Yud, the beginning of the Sif, the first few k'toim of the Sif, Be'etzem the Rebbe does in a few k'toim, the Rebbe gives chazara, a sikkum of the first sikh. The Rebbe says that tzad. What's the tzad? The tzad is that the Dvar Hashem is the chayus of the nivra. Right? I'm completely connected and identify with Alikus. But then the Rebbe says, the bottom of page 16 of the Kovetz, the right side, as their bittul from their nivra is nit kein bittul b'shlei mosei. Why? For if he bald as their chayus was sich mislabish in nivroim is a chayus mit sumtzum und mugboloit in nivra, is doch neis in mokem limitzias hayesh, and mela zeich their bittul mitzad dem chayus nit kein bittul b'shlei mosei. Yes, it has that maila that the world is completely connected with the Eibishter. But at the end of the day, we're always speaking about a velt and elikus and a dargan elikus that is mislabish in the velt. On the one hand, it's islabshus creates a complete identification, which on the one hand is tachlis bittul. But we're talking about a bittul, something that exists. It's elikus that's mislabish in it. The fact that he's mislabish in it, what's islabshus? Islabshus means I relate. There's a connection. He comes to the world on the world terms and connects with the world. So the world isn't in ganzen bottom mitzad this nekude that the gilul likus, it's a dargan likus that gives an isnus makom nivra. And here starts this mahalach that we'll see in the next few sichos, which is the tak on the one hand meret vegen dvar Hashem gilul likus that's slabish in the nivroim. Aber zusammen mit them, we also have the quality of elikus shalamayla me'abriya. And Be'etzem here comes, and again, the exact oisius will depend on which sicha, but here comes, like you see very often in the Rebbe's Torah, the nekudas achibur. What's the chibur? The chibur of Yichud Tata and Yichud Ilah. Or in some sichas, it's the chibur of Achdus Hashem milmata l'mayla and milmayla l'mata. Now what's the nekuda? The nekuda is, so the oisius in this sicha, Vayesh Yutas Kislev, is the Rebbe connects the two big chidushim. At the beginning of Sif Tes, the Rebbe says, Al Rebbe is mevar and mechadish and shayuchad ve'emunah, two close stick nekudas. One nekuda is the dvar avaya that's b'chol nivra and that the world is savah b'chol rega b'rega. And the second nekuda that's later shayuchad ve'emunah and perek zayin, tzimtzum lav kipshuti. Right, which in some of the sikhs the Rebbe gives more oisis when he gets it then. And the Rebbe connects tzimtzum lav kipshuti with the word of savah b'chol rega. So the nekuda of tzimtzum lav kipshuti is because what's the tzimtzum? The tzimtzum is before the tzimtzum is oyer insoif. After the tzimtzum is the oyer mugbal, which through tzimtzumim becomes the oyer that we spoke about before, the oyer, the dvar Hashem that's in Slavish and the Nivroim. But if I say tzimtzum lav kipshutei, so kumtei is that even after the tzimtzum, the oyer abligvol is dalamata. So in the Nivroim that are receiving their chayis l'chayra from an oyer mugbal, and the oil that gives an esinas mokim for oilamis. At the same time, mitzad emes, tzimtzum lav kipshutei. So in that mokim of the dvar Hashem that's in Slavish and the Nivro, and that l'chayra gives an esinas mokim loilamis. But then we have here oir ein soif that is shoylol loilamis in ganzen. Now, obviously, how does that work together? So that's in the toichin of the sicha. Just say the sicha. It's here. It's very very bekitzer. In other sichas, right there over here, a little more oisius. But the Rebbe, this sichas mutas kisla tavshem mem aleph. But Be'etzem, the sugya the Rebbe spoke about then, Be'etzem started a few months earlier, and some of those nekudis are brought here in Ha'ara 84, and other Ha'aras here in the sicha. It's a sugya that Rebbe Be'etzem started speaking about in the summer of Tavshin Mem, from Parshas Dvarim, and then it was. Ekev, or it started bit Matis Masi, and then Dvarim, Ekev, Re'ei. There were a few Kama Sikhs that Rebbe spoke about this Barichis, and then the Rebbe said a Lashon, it was Parshas Dvarim, the Rebbe said, das the Sugis was Medarf Kochen in Chassidus. The Rebbe said, Bechlal, there's a lot of Sugis in Chassidus. So the Rebbe said like this, the Rebbe said, there's Sugis, Noheira Tichla, Noheira Uchma, there's Geschmack of Sugis. But beikir is a kochen in the ikir. I don't know exact lashon. The main sugyas of chassidus. And the Rebbe said like this: tzimtzum lav kipshutei, hashkacha pratis, and ishabos b'chol rega. In these sichas, you'll meet these terms many times throughout these sichas. Right, and this was the Rebbe spoke about it for a few months, and this became this sicha, this mugadik sicha from Yutas Kislev Mem Aleph was miyusad on those sichas. Fine, that's the sicha of Yeshiv Yutas Kislev. Then comes the sicha of Kuntas and Yonash Teres Achsidis from Yutas Kislev Tavshin Chavav. When the Rebbe said it was mamish a massive shturim. Then the Rebbe was magiyit, also a whole parsha. The Rebbe asked to be magiyit as the when they wanted to print Sefer Erech in the first krach, so they asked the Rebbe if the Rebbe could write a mavoi. So the Rebbe said, if you bring in the sicha from Yutas Kislev, it was a year or two later, from Yutas Kislev, was when we read back in the Kud of Yechide and the different Biur Mechsidis, then I'll use it as a mavoi. They brought it into the Rebbe, and it sat on the Rebbe's desk for a few years, and the whole Sefer Erech, the first Sefer Erech, was delayed for a few years. It wasn't able to be printed, because the Rebbe wrote to Shazar that was pushing the Rebbe that it should be printed, because he arranged there should be money from the German Claims Conference to pay for the Chabad Encyclopedia. So the Rebbe said that the Sefer is Pasha ready, it's all ready to go, just waiting for my Hagah of the last 8 pages of the Sefer, which is Kundush Yonash Teres Achsidis. This letter was written Tavshin Chav Ches. There's 3 years later, Tavshin Lamed Aleph, the Rebbe was looking for it, the Rebbe couldn't find it. So if you had to write it again, the Rebbe was Magiyah the Sefer. L'poyel, so the Sikh is a very Yisayistic Sikh, a lot of Inyanim Yisaydim in Chassidus, and it's not everyone, many of you learned the Sikh or heard of the Sikh and the Kudus of the Sikh. Here, the Kudus Negil in Yaneinu is that the Rebbe shows how Chassidus is the Yechide, and Yechide is the 5th Chelik in Torah, which, right, there's the 4 Ilamis, and there's the 4 Chalakim, and there's Pshat Remes Dorsoid, and then there's Chassidus. And the Yechida, the Chassidus, on the one hand, it's hecher from all Ifanim in Torah, and it gives chayis and it adds beer in all the Ifanim. Then, as a dogma, the Rebbe takes Moidani, the Rebbe explains Moidani according to the 4 Pshat Emes Rosh, and then the beer of Chassidus. Here, the Nekudas Negilin Yanenu is how the Rebbe shows what Chassidus does, the beer Chassidus gives to the chelik of Soid, the beer of Soid of Moidani. That the beer of Soid of Moidani is we're talking about Malchus and Yisoid, Spheres of Malchus and Spheres of Yisoid, and Chassidus gives us this beer, and the Teichen of beer is this Nekuda. The Malchus is a Dargan Elikos that has a Shaychus to Ilmas, has Mahava Ilmas. Mitzat Sheni, it connects to Yisoid, and Yisoid is connected to the previous Spheres, Biz to the Oiris, Hecher than Etzils, and Koydem Atzimtzum, Uvemela that even in the Oir that's Mahava the Oilam, that's it's connected to Atzmus Ein Soif, so you have the Oilam, how it's the oil that's connected to Ilmis, and within that space we also have the Gilui von Hecher. We'll just say Benegea to here, or the certain sifim that were brought here that was Negea directly to this Nekuda. If you have time and you want to go through understand the beer better, learn the sifim in the middle as well. Meaning the sifim here are Tes Yud Yud Aleph and then Tes Vav. Yud Beis Yud Gimel Yud Aleph explain the other Ifanim of Moida Ani, but if you learn the whole Arichas, it's a lot more Geshmak this in you. In the next Sikha, which is the Hadrin Lamed Hey, which was the first Hadrin of Rambam, that it was Magia, it's the long Hadrin on Rambam. So here the Hadrin is Miyosid on Be'ikr on the first 2 halachas of Rambam, and the Nekuda is here the Rebbe speaks about 2 dargas in Elikos. The Rebbe uses Lashon Rambam, Matzui and Einei Matzui. And here as well, so Matzui and Einei Matzui, even Klali, and the Rebbe says this a few times in the Sikha, in the Aris, because in the opinion the Rebbe tries to stay away from Oisis of Chassidus. It's a Rambam Sikha. But in the Aris, some Aris, that the Rebbe added later, the Rebbe connects it to different dargas of Chassidus. So the Rebbe connects it to Memale and Soiviv, to Alikos, V'acharat Tzimtzum, and Koydem at Tzimtzum. And here as well, the Kama Mekoymes, the Rebbe's Madgish, this Nekuda, you can see it on page 30, and a similar Oisius on page 35. The Rebbe here brings the mashal that you have a chachem that be'etzem is much smarter than the katan that he's speaking to, and then he has to be mitzamtzim himself to relate to the katan. But then the Rebbe says that even then, when the chachem relates to the katan, he's mitzamtzim and speaks to the katan. Right? You always have the chacham speak to the katan, or the av that's misachik in bnei katan, and that's what they call the mashal of tzimtzum, that he goes down and relates to the katan on the katan's level, and take relates. Right, take leaves his regular space, and he doesn't think in his regular, the way he regularly thinks when he's discussing something with a katan or playing with a katan. But here there's not just the flip side. Aber chas v'shalom to mean that at this moment the tate becomes a tippish, right? Or that the chacham forgets all his wisdom. He stays with the ganze bli gvul. So that's an nekuda. Even way he's matzui, he still has einei matzui. And this is poyol, as the Rebbe explains in the Sikh, this is poyol on the oilamis. Mitzad matzui, the Welt has a mitzias. Mitzad einei matzui, the mitzias is not a mitzias amitis, there's the bittul oilamis. Be'emshech l'zeh, there's the next Sikha, which is be'etzem very similar, with slight differences from the Sikha of Hadrin al Rambam. You see in a few places there is mitzay into the Sikha of Hadrin. So Eschan and Chelik of Dalit, very gishmak Sikha. Here, in the previous Sikha, the Rebbe connects with the Rambam and attributes to the Rambam's 2 halachas, the 2 dargas of Matzui and Einei Matzui. Here, the Rebbe connects it to Rambam and Rashi. That the Rambam that the first halachas in Rambam versus the Rashi on Ataris Ladas Kevay Lakim Red Movadai. So the Rebbe connects it. The Rebbe connects these 2 dargas of Matzui and Einei Matzui. Here it's a bit of different lashonis. The Rebbe here connects it to Yachid and Echad. That's the Sikh over here. Then there's the small K'toim over here. They're very Geshmaki in Yonim. They're a Moisef Beer in Shayuchad ve'Emunah. That's the first chelik. Then, just for a minute, the last chelik. So here is the Sikha of Mishpatim Tashon Chav Zayin. The Ilam knows what the Sikha is. Seen the Sikha? Ever looked at the Sikha? So this is a Sikha that Be'etzem was said Be'kesher to learning the Rambam on the radio. learning the Tanya on the radio. Tavshin Chazayin, they started, I think it was Tavshin Chaf, it started. And at different times when so Bechlal, we know that Shiurim Sefer Tanya was Mugeh by the Rebbe. What's that Mugeh, right? Every shir before he said it over, Matzi Shabbos would be the shir, the Rebbe would listen to the shir. He would say the shir on the radio. Before the shir, he would write it up, give it into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was Magid. There's Meirdik Biyurim there, and Hagoyes. So here, they mamish struggled. A few shilas on what's going on in Perek Dalet and Hey. But a big shaila here is, you just look over here on page 61 and 62, so you see in 61, the end of Perek Dalet, so like 7-8 lines before the end of the Perek, V'hinei b'chinas hatzimtzum starts with a brackets. So, but the bracket doesn't finish. So where's the end of that bracket, of the end of Perek Dalet, the Sharichot ve'emunah? It's probably not there. So shaila, what's going on there? So that was the shaila they gave into the Rebbe, amongst other shailas. The Rebbe first wrote a shtickle beer, and it was a back and forth. Then he said he'll be mevayer on Shabbos. And the Rebbe gerät a lange beer. But what's very interesting is, was are coming from their beer? So the Rebbe says there, at the end of the whole beer, the Rebbe says, you look at the last page here of the Kovetz, Be'im biur hanal bichlalusei nachein. See that obviously the Rebbe wrote this in, because the beer is in Yiddish, this is all Lashon Kodesh. If Bechlalus, this beer is correct, I'm not going to get into the details, but if Bechlalus, this beer is correct, you could explain a suffix. There's Yeshlifshoit, a suffix, Stadi L'cheira, which where's the siyum of the bracket that starts at the end of Perek Dalet. So the Rebbe said, according to what we explained over here, you could say like this, because the whole beer it explains that from the beginning of the bracket of Dalet till the end of Hey is one arichis. The Rebbe said, Mekenzagin, that be'etzem, the end of Perek Hey, we see finishes with a bracket. It's a one-line bracket. So Yeshloimer, that the last bracket was a double bracket. It finished 2 Chatzoi Ribuaz. And the world-famous Bacher HaZetzer from Claim to Fame, from Rashi Sichos and many other places, right? So the Bacher HaZetzer saw the extra bracket and he said, what's the zoing here? So he fixed it. Right? Now what did the Rebbe do here? The Rebbe here gives a Meirdik beer that explains Mamish Meirdik in Yanim in Tanya. Mendel Wächter famously he speaks about this often. Basically, this is the Sicha that turned him into a chassid. Because he would come to Rebbe Yale. It was every Thursday night, and we'd learn with him. And the years he was a scarf to Lubavitch, so the rules were you're only allowed to learn until the Rebbe Rashab, from the Kehillah where he comes from. And they were learning Tanya. So they learned Biyurim on Tanya, and they would learn, then the Sefer was Biyurim from Korf, the Kuti Biyurim from Korf. And they learned Perek Dalet, and hey, they got stuck here, must tut sich da. They said, okay, let me learn the beer. So they learned different Biyurim there. Biyurim of Chassidim. Here they're learning a beer. And there it doesn't really bring Myra Mekoimis. They're learning the beer, and it's mamish a Meirdik beer. And ultimately asking a beer, where's this beer from? But after you finish the beer, you realize, okay, this is not another beer of Greinim, it's not another beer of another chassid. This is Epis Anders. And finally, realized that it's a beer for Rebbe. And this completely, he shut down for a few weeks. He didn't come. He had to revisit everything. But ultimately, this is what made it a chassid. Right, it's Geshmak HaMaisa, but really, it's a sicha, very, very sadistic sicha. And this, in a way, is the flip side of this whole conversation. Right, so first we start off saying that, right, there's the Dvar Vayis and Slavish B'chol Nivra. But then there's a Chisar, because there's a Tzimtzum, and it's not. And it doesn't, and Omelu, mitzad this Darga, you can't say that the Oilumis are in ganzen bottle. Only mitzad Erin Soy, but here there's a Tzimtzum. So then we come and say Tzimtzum Lav Kipshutei. Then we come and say that the Motzui, any Motzui exists within the Motzui. That the Yechidi, the next Sikha, right? Each Sikha has its different Lashonis, that the higher Darga exists within the lower Darga. But here in this Sikha, we come and say, if the Welt is in ganzen bottle, there's no Metzias, so what's with Teirah Mitzvahs? And what's our Shlichus here? And what's with the Metzias So'ilam? And this Sikha brings out the other side. The Welt is a Metzias. And that's the whole Vart Sharichot Emunah. After the previous Prakim, you'll come to Maskan Nishtakim Welt. So here we madgish the other side. The side, Asiyeda at Tzimtzum, in the Sikh, you have a few times the Lashon, Tzimtzum is a Metzias. Now, at the same time, we have to understand how the Tzimtzum is a Metzias, the Kalim are Metzias, so Melo, the Welt is a Metzias, Teirah Mitzvahs is real, we're actually doing something, we're dealing with a real world, and we're bringing Kedusha to a world that previously wasn't Kaddish, right? There's real change happening. And at the same time, the tzimtzum lav kipshuti, right? That's where it all comes together. But this sikha sort of brings out that side, the side of the metzius of the tzimtzum. It's a very long sikha, and it goes into and the pasha takes you through the arichis of shar yichud ve'emunah, of those prakim. If you have the time to go through the sikha and learn how it goes in the prakim, it's gevaldik. If not, I would say you could start from. In this sikha, you could start from page 65 on the bottom paragraph, the next few pages, and you'll get the general mahalach. But for shteitzich, even if you have time, do before that and afterwards, mamish zeir reich, how the Rebbe learns kam inyonim in shayichud ve'emunah. Al kolpanim, yeah. So this is the sin. It's Chedesh Kislev and Zayin Batzlacha Rabbe, and the shkoyach to Mendel for preparing the kovetz and for this masteros and. Chassidus Chedesh from Geula, Chaim.